Hello, my name is Peter Summers. I want to welcome you to Somerskogen Sugarbush. This is the hobby that has gotten completely out of control. People often ask me, well, why do you have so many hobbies? Well, it's because maple syrup season is only 2 months long. It is March. The ground is still, we still have snow on the ground. It's still crunchy. You can only make maple syrup when daytime temperatures are above freezing and nighttime temperatures are below freezing. So basically, like in this northern climate, it's like the mud season. Making maple syrup is very, very easy. It's basically boiling. That's all you have to do. If you can heat up soup, you can make syrup. We've gotten a little bit out of control. I think we tapped about 1,100. We have about 1,100 trees that we tap every spring, and from that make somewhere in the range of 400 to 600 gallons of maple syrup. It's a very simple process. We've made it a little bit more complicated so that we could make more syrup. Somerskogen, Summers, my last name. Skogen means woods in Norwegian, the logo being a maple leaf with the Norwegian flag for the Norwegian ancestry that we have. Sugarbush is just a term for a maple forest. Come along with me, we'll hopefully learn a couple of things. Okay, so the number one most important thing that you need to be able to do if you're going to make maple syrup is be able to identify a maple tree. The maple trees in our area, the younger ones, you can tell they have like a little silvery pattern on the bark. Some of the older ones, the bark starts peeling off, almost looks like bigger chunks of like bacon. In our forest, we have primarily maple, oak, and basswood. People are usually pretty familiar with what a maple leaf looks like. The problem is the sap flows in the spring. I want to identify by the leaf. You just mark your trees in the summer or the fall. You look at enough trees, they start looking different. If you don't look at enough trees, they all look the same. You can also identify based upon the branching pattern. The maple, the branches come off opposite of each other. Other types of trees will have alternating branches where they don't come off across from each other. So branching, you can look at the buds, the bark, or from the previous year, the leaves. But identify the maple tree, and in our woods, it's really easy to tell which ones are maple trees because we got lines going to them. So you just, if there's a line to it, put a tap in it. Okay, so after we have identified a maple tree, then we put our taps in there. And what we want to look for is a spot that hasn't been tapped recently, because after a tree will essentially treat an old tap hole like a wound, and it'll sort of like kill off that little segment, and if the tap was there, you get dead wood above and below it. So we want to look for the old tap holes, make sure that the tree was healing properly. We use a 5/16 inch bit. This is smaller than in the past. It used to be 7/16, but research has shown you get almost as much sap from a 5/16 inch hole as you do from 7/16, less damage to the tree. All we're gonna do is put it in about 2 to 2.5 inches. And so let's see. Slight upward angle. Make sure it's clean, and then drips out and tap it in gently. Better to tap it in lightly and have to go back and tighten it up rather than getting too aggressive and splitting the bark. Some trees are more convenient than others. This one just happens to be on a ravine, so this is not convenient at all. It's important to make sure that, whoa! It's important to make sure that the drop line will reach where you want to tap. 2 down, about 1,000 to go. We can actually tap below the line because it's on vacuum power, and so we can actually pull the sap upward. Moving right along. Here's a pretty good example of an old tap hole that's healed up really nicely, and then there's another one right there. So the fact that these tap holes are healing up really well, it tells us that this tree is healthy. We can continue to tap it. If the tap holes wouldn't have been healed, then it would be an indication that maybe we should let this tree essentially recover better before we tap it again. And taking the sap from the tree doesn't hurt it as long as you only take a little bit. It's sort of like donating blood, and we take about they estimate maybe about 10% of the sap. We'll go over here, down and to the left. Okay, there's our tap hole we put in. You can see the sap dripping out of there. It actually takes about 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup, so Count 40 drops, that would be 1 drop of syrup. And we'll put in our spile. You hear the vacuum pressure. Tap it in there, and then we can see tap in the line there. And all of these lines are connected, and they all go down to the lowest spot in our woods where we have a tank that's connected to a vacuum line. This is the vacuum releaser. So the black tube on top delivers vacuum pressure. So there's actually a pump up at our sugar house that's pulling air out of the system. And then you can see that gauge there. It's at about 24 to 25 inches of mercury, so it's a negative pressure. All of these lines that come out of here, they go up into the woods, and all of the trees are connected. Got 2 bigger black hoses. One is the vacuum line, the other one is so we can pump the sap up to the sugar house, which is about 700 feet away. This releaser fills up. It will raise a float, so sort of like just like in a toilet, raises that float up, and that will trigger this thing to open and release the sap. Inside right now, we have, it says 18 inches of sap in there. This is an 800-gallon tank. When it's at 18 inches, 273 gallons of sap. So 273 gallons of sap in here. That's enough to make about, divide that by 40, what do we get? Pretty close to 7 gallons of maple syrup. So what we'll do is we'll wait here. Watch this, we'll watch the sap be released, and then close it. Won't take too long when the sap's running pretty well. Here you can see the sap running into the releaser. When it's flowing really well, the 1100 or so taps, it will look almost like a garden hose has been left on. Still early in the morning, so it's not flowing too much yet. The first portion of maple syrup making was identifying our trees, tapping the trees, and collecting the sap in our tubing lines. The next steps we'll take is we will head up to the sugar house and take a look at how we process the sap, concentrate with reverse osmosis, and use the evaporator. My name is Peter Summers. I'm a travel nurse recruiter for Atlas MedStaff.